We're going to talk about what has happened in Ukraine on this day of the Russian invasion. We'll examine the actions and the strategies, both military and political. Now, if this is your first time watching, my name is Darren Gertis. I'm a professor who's built multiple leadership programs at Charleston Southern University. So we'll also view these events through the lens of leadership. And I also wrote a book about Zelensky called I Need Ammunition, Not a Ride, and you can find it on Amazon. All right, so it's day 94, and Kherson has been relatively quiet until recently, but there's been a counteroffensive, and they've had some significant effect, having an impact on taking ground back from the Russians. Now, the interesting thing about that is, while that's not the front, or I mean, it is the front, but it's not like the hottest front of the war. The hottest front is over in the east. If you can, have some effect in Kherson in the south, what you can do is you can force the Russians to have to redeploy other forces there, and that can, change the game as well. The focus is still in Severodonetsk, and again, that's the last toehold of Ukrainian territory in Luhansk. Severodonetsk and its sister city just across the river. Zelensky spoke about this in his address, and he talked about how the situation is very complicated, especially in these areas in the Donbas. And he listed the key cities: Severodonetsk and Lysychansk and some others. Popasna. Popasna is taken, and they're spreading up north from Popasna. And he said the Russian offensive is concentrated. And that was a really important line in his speech. The Russian offensive is concentrated. Now, here's what happened. By concentrating his forces, it's kind of like if you use a magnifying glass, right? I mean, you take the sun's rays, and the sun's rays are diffused. But if you take a magnifying glass, you can actually start a fire. Well, that's kind of what's going on here. By concentrating, the Russians have become far more formidable. If you look at a map of the first day of the war, I mean, you're like, whoa, the Russians are everywhere. Even the first few days, the first week, the first few weeks, they're just coming all across the entire Ukraine. It's like it's hard to focus. Now, where they are, they're really focused on the eastern side in Luhansk, in Donbass, so Luhansk and in Donetsk. And they're in these particular two districts. Yes, they occupy Zaporizhia and Kherson and some other places, but they're really not doing a lot there. They're doing it in a focused, concentrated way, and they're taking some ground. And they're more dangerous, in my estimation, when they're concentrated. But their concentration also allows the Ukrainians to concentrate, so they're stronger as well. So if the Russians ever hope to liberate Donbass, they need to move a lot faster. And I think they're getting bogged down. Um, Now, what's going to happen here is that if they can take this ground, then they're going to have a referendum or something along those lines and try to get some fake authenticity or officiality of we're the People's Republic of Donetsk, or we're a region of Russia or whatever, because we had a popular referendum. In fact, the Donetsk People's Republic head, his name is Denis Pushlin. He's a self-appointed head who, since 2014, not in 2014 itself, but since 2014, somewhere along the way, he voted himself into power somehow, unofficially, but he claims to be the head of this republic. And he says that they're going to have a referendum that will follow the complete control of Donetsk and Luhansk. And that referendum probably won't get I mean, look, so I saw a poll the other day that the absolute hatred for Russia, especially in Ukraine, is especially high. But even in those areas in the east, in Donetsk and Luhansk and other areas in the east, it was like 80% or something like that in most of the country. Like, we absolutely hate Russia. And it was like 77% in those regions. And there's a reason for that. Like, the popular support, if you flipped it, the popular support was in the single digits all across the country, but it was slightly higher, only slightly, in those regions. And there's a reason for that. And that they've been destroying these cities. So even if you were pro-Russian before, it's kind of hard to get on board with them destroying your home and then still being pro-Russian. Okay, so the Russian government would portray this if they could capture those cities as, or these regions as, maybe justification for their special operation. Maybe they declare a victory, but that doesn't mean that the Ukrainians would stop fighting. Okay, the Ukrainian defense minister was talking about Western artillery pieces that are already deployed. Okay, the U.S. has already sent M777 howitzers. There are FH-70 howitzers there. The French Caesar ACS is already there. Now, here's what's important about understanding this. Artillery is known as the king of battle. The infantry is the queen of battle. You can't hold land without the infantry, but the king of battle is artillery. Union General William Tecumseh Sherman said a battery of field artillery is worth 1,000 muskets. Like, that's pretty impressive, right? Napoleon said, "God's on the side with the best artillery," and that's kind of a tongue-in-cheek way of saying, yeah, it's really powerful. Even Stalin called artillery the god of war. Okay, and so they're starting to get better artillery, even artillery that will be able to take the fight to the Russians. Now, here's why this is important, because until now, Russia had the superior artillery. And the Biden administration is now starting to send these long-range rocket systems, and the Biden administration approved it today. This long-range rocket systems, which Sergei Lavrov, who continually lies about stuff, called this a quote serious step toward an unacceptable escalation. Like, no, I mean, you knew this was going to happen. Who's escalating this? You escalated it when you invaded. Anyway, I'm going to not belabor that. But listen, so here's what's happening. If Ukraine has artillery that can only fire 20 miles, okay, and the Russians have artillery that can fire 40 miles, it's not a fair fight, right? Like, the Ukrainians have to be bolder and braver and risk more to get in 20 miles to be able to tag them, where they can be all that 20 miles in, they can be hit and hit and hit and hit with impunity by the Russians. Well, now it's a fair fight once these artillery pieces catch up. So that's what's happening now. And so the tide is turning, but what will happen before they actually have a chance to make the tide turn? That's really the question of strategy right now. How can they hold off until they have the equipment? Okay, that's it for today. Stay tuned, and I'll talk about day 95 tomorrow. Hey, if this video was helpful, hit like to help others find it in YouTube's algorithm. Subscribe so that you can stay informed. And one more thing, if you are moved to contribute to the humanitarian aid for Ukraine, I have a link below for Samaritan's Purse. If you want to give, be sure to give only to reputable organizations. There's a lot of scammers out there. Thanks for your time.